The day my son stood up at his own retirement party and told the room he was a self-made man. I was sitting 3 tables away, next to my daughter-in-law's parents, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched. He said it again, louder this time, like he needed the whole banquet hall at the Fairmont in downtown Ottawa to hear it. Everything I have, I built myself. From nothing. I set the glass down very carefully. 31 years ago, I took out a second mortgage on the house in Canada to pay his first year at Carleton. I didn't tell him that part was difficult. I didn't want him to feel the weight of it. Maybe that was my mistake. My name is Hugh. I'm 67 years old. I spent 34 years as a civil engineer with the federal government, mostly infrastructure contracts, bridges and water systems in communities most people couldn't find on a map. I retired in 2019. My wife Lorraine passed 2 years later from a stroke, and since then it's been mostly quiet. I have a house that's paid off, a pension that covers my needs, and a dog named Bucket who doesn't care about any of the things I'm about to tell you. I want to be honest with you. I didn't go into that evening looking for a confrontation. I went because my son asked me to come, and because I still believed, right up until that moment, that we were fine. That whatever distance had grown between us was just the ordinary kind. The kind every father and adult son navigate without making it into something dramatic. I know better now. Let me go back to where it actually started, not the party. About 2 years before that. My daughter-in-law, I'll call her that because that's what she is, even now. Her name is Sasha. She's smart, she's organized, and for the first few years after she and my son got married, we got along well enough. She called on holidays. She sent a card when Lorraine died. She seemed like a reasonable person. What I didn't see at first was how much of my son's thinking she shaped, not in a loud way, quietly. The way water shapes stone over time. You don't notice until you look one day and the edges are completely different. It started with the cottage. Lorraine and I bought a small place on Lac des Chênes, about 40 minutes north of Gatineau, back in 1994. Nothing fancy, a 2-bedroom with a dock that needed new boards every few years. We spent every August there for 25 years. It was where my son learned to fish, where we scattered some of Lorraine's ashes the summer after she passed, where I still went on weekends in the summer just to sit and not have to talk to anyone. About 8 months after Lorraine died, my son called and said he and Sasha had been talking. They thought it would make more practical sense if the cottage was put in their names. For tax purposes, he said, and because they could actually use it with the grandchildren. He had 2 kids by then, ages 4 and 6, whereas I was out there alone most of the time, and wasn't that a bit much to manage? I was 64 years old. I wasn't decrepit, but I also wasn't ready to argue with my son while I was still grieving, so I said I'd think about it. My son heard that as a yes. 3 weeks later, Sasha's brother showed up with a truck and a kayak rack for the dock. Nobody asked me. When I drove up that weekend, there were kids' pool noodles in the shed and a new barbecue on the deck that wasn't mine. And someone had moved Lorraine's ceramic loon from the windowsill in the kitchen to a box in the corner. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time. I called my son that night. He said they were just making use of the space, and that I was being sensitive. Sasha got on the phone at some point and talked about how the property taxes had gone up significantly. Which was true. Everything in the Gatineau Hills corridor had jumped in recent years. And how if I transferred the deed, they could offset some of it through their family trust. I'm an engineer, not a financial planner, but I know enough to know that sentence didn't quite make sense. I called my accountant on Monday. He said the arrangement my son was describing would benefit them considerably and protect essentially nothing for me. I did not transfer the deed. That was the beginning of the cold period. My son started calling less. When I drove to their place in Barhaven for Sunday dinners, which I did faithfully, almost every 2 weeks, Sasha was often just stepping out, or just getting the kids down. My son would make conversation, but it felt like he was doing me a favor, like I was a meeting he had to get through. The grandkids, though. Those 2 I loved without complication. The older one, a boy, was obsessed with model trains, and I spent a whole winter building a layout with him in my basement. His little sister drew pictures of Bucket the dog and left them on my windshield when I visited. Those two I held on to. I started noticing money things. Small things at first. My son asked to borrow $800 in the spring, said his truck needed brake work. I transferred it that afternoon. He didn't mention paying it back. 2 months later, Sasha mentioned, casually over dinner, not even to me directly but sort of toward the table, that the kids' hockey registration for the season was brutal this year. Almost $4,000 for both of them. I heard that as a request. I wrote a check. I want to be clear. I don't resent giving money to my grandchildren. I never will. But I started to feel, around that time, like I was being managed. Like there was a budget that included me as a line item, and it was just a matter of presenting things in the right order. I said nothing. I'm not someone who says things easily. Lorraine used to tease me about it, said I could hold a feeling for 6 months without it showing on my face. She meant it affectionately. I'm not sure it always served me well. The retirement party invitation came in September. My son was leaving his position as a senior project manager at a tech firm he'd been with for 12 years, and his colleagues were throwing him an event at the Fairmont. He texted me the details. Not a call, a text, with the address and a dress code. I bought a new sport coat. I got my hair cut. I drove downtown in the rain and found parking 2 blocks away, and I was there at 7 o'clock sharp because I was raised to be on time. The room was beautiful. Round tables with white linens, a long bar down one side, a projector screen at the front cycling through photos of my son's career. I found my table. I was seated with Sasha's parents, a couple from Nepean I'd met a handful of times over the years, perfectly pleasant people, and 2 of my son's colleagues I didn't know. My son came over briefly when I arrived. Handshake, not a hug. He looked good. He looked successful. He looked like someone who had built something and knew it. The evening started well enough. There were speeches from colleagues, a video his team had made. My son was genuinely well liked at that company. I could see that, and I felt proud in spite of everything. That's the complicated part. I was proud of him. I still am. That doesn't go away. Then he got up to speak. He thanked his wife first, which was right. He thanked his team. He thanked a mentor from early in his career, a man named Robert who I'd never heard of. He talked about a moment 15 years ago when he almost quit and how he pushed through. And then he said, I never had anyone hand me anything. Everything I've accomplished I did on my own. No safety net, no help. Just showing up every day and doing the work. He said it the way people say things they've been wanting to say for a long time. The room applauded. Sasha, at the head table, nodded and smiled. I looked down at my plate. I thought about the second mortgage. I thought about the 8 years I paid his cell phone bill while he was building his career because he said he couldn't swing it yet. I thought about the truck loan in 2014, $12,000, which he paid back half of. I thought about the month after his first daughter was born, when Lorraine and I drove up every weekend for 2 months to help because Sasha's mother was ill, and they were exhausted, and how I fixed their leaking bathroom faucet and their garage door and repainted the nursery ceiling because the contractor had done a sloppy job. I thought about the cottage, Lorraine's ceramic loon, sitting in a box in the corner of a shed. I thought about 31 years, and then I thought about the envelope in my jacket pocket. I had brought it deliberately. I want to be honest about that. I'm not a man who acts impulsively. 30 years on engineering projects taught me what my father always said. If something is going to give way, it will give way at the joint. You don't fix the crack, you fix what's underneath. The envelope had been prepared 2 weeks earlier, after a conversation with my lawyer, a woman I've trusted for nearly 20 years who has an office on Spark Street. Inside it was a 1-page letter and a set of documents. The letter said this. That effective immediately, I was updating my estate plan. The cottage on Lac des Chênes would be left in trust, to be divided equally between my 2 grandchildren when each turned 25. Not to my son or his wife. My financial accounts would be distributed the same way. I had also enclosed a summary of what I calculated I had contributed to my son's life over the years. The tuition, the loans, the gifts, the truck, totaling in round numbers a little over $62,000. Not a demand for repayment. Just a document. Just so it existed somewhere. At the bottom of the letter, I had written one sentence. I want you to know that I am proud of you. I also want you to know that you did not do this alone. After the applause died down and my son had returned to his table, I waited. I let the dessert come. I let the coffee be poured. I waited until the room had settled into that comfortable late evening noise. The scraping of chairs, the low laughter, people starting to gather their coats. Then I got up, walked to the head table. Sasha saw me coming and her expression shifted in a way I noticed but didn't react to. My son looked up. I could see him trying to read my face. I put the envelope on the table in front of him. I put my hand briefly on his shoulder. I said quietly just to him, "Read this at home." That was all. I shook hands with a few of his colleagues on my way out, because that's what you do, said goodnight to Sasha's parents, retrieved my coat, walked 2 blocks in the rain to my car. I drove home on the 417, the city lights trailing in the wet windshield, bucket waiting at the door when I got in. I won't pretend I slept well. I lay there for a long time thinking about my son at age 9, showing me a science project he'd built out of cardboard and tape, a model of the Parliament buildings, which even at 9 he was proud of in that particular way he had. Quiet pride, eyes on the floor, but listening very carefully for what you thought. He got that from me, actually. I heard from him 4 days later. Not a call, a text first, then a call when I didn't respond immediately. He was not happy. He said the letter was unnecessary. He said I'd embarrassed him, even though no one else had seen. He said the estate changes felt like a punishment and that I was being, the word he used was controlling. I let him finish. Then I said, I would have preferred to have this conversation earlier. I should have said some of this is that's on me. But I needed you to know. Silence on the line, I said. I love you. I'm not trying to punish you. But you stood up in front of 200 people and said you did everything alone, and that's not true. And I've been quiet about a lot of things for a long time, and I think that's made things worse, not better. More silence, he said. The cottage thing, Sasha thought. I know what Sasha thought, I said. The cottage stays in my name until I decide otherwise. He didn't have an answer to that. We talked for another 40 minutes. It wasn't a good conversation. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was real, which was more than we'd managed in probably 3 years. He came over the following Sunday, alone without Sasha. He sat at my kitchen table and I made coffee, and we talked about his mother and about the model train set, and about the fact that we'd both let things go unsaid for too long. He didn't apologize exactly, but he acknowledged things. That matters. It's beginning. My grandchildren were there for Christmas. I drove out to Barhaven and we put a puzzle together on the floor, and his daughter drew a new picture of Bucket, and his son asked if the train layout was still in the basement. I said yes. We spent an hour down there while the adults had dinner. The estate documents are still as I wrote them. The cottage is still mine. I go up there most weekends in the summer. I replaced the boards on the dock again last June. Did it myself, took 2 days, it was satisfying work. I put Lorraine's ceramic loon back on the kitchen windowsill where it belongs. She collected them, all sizes. That one was the first she ever bought, at a gift shop in Huntsville on our first trip north, 38 years ago. It's a small thing, but the small things, I've learned, are the joints. They're where you find out what holds and what doesn't.